Hello guys. So this video is going to be very important because we are not only covering five companies interview questions. So you can see what all companies these are: PureSoft, Adobe, Capgemini, THP, and Appsero. So I got a mail from one of my student, and he was preparing for interviews. So he sent me the interview question. He consolidated all the interview question of these five companies and to me. So I thought to create a video so that you guys are aware what all actual interview question been asked and how you can, and by viewing those interview questions you can understand like what is the pattern that Adobe used to ask to a QA, what is Capgemini used to ask to the candidate, and what is THB, and same goes with the other companies. So this video is going to be very important and you need to stay with me in this video. So let's start with our first company. So this is PureSoft we are limited. Questions are, obviously, I mean, I have not included those basic questions. Tell me about yourself and your project and responsibility. So we will focus this focus on only on the automation part, and that candidate is preparing or giving entry for automation, because right now everybody is asking for automation. I mean, if you write only manual in your CV, and your chances of getting selected in the interview by the HR is very rare, because everybody wants that automation, Selenium, Java, test ng should be there in a resume. I mean, this is how, I mean, 2 or 3 days back, I got a call from one of the HR, and she was asking, "Are you, I mean, working automation or in manual?" So I told her, like, I mean, I have 8 to 9 years of experience in automation, and that is like mix. Sometimes 3 continuous years in automation, sometimes 6 months in automation, and through 2 months in manual. So it is a mixed role, because in all the organization everybody want a candidate who is good in both manual and automation. But she was not satisfied with my answer. She was saying, like, I mean, I want every a candidate who has experience in automation only. So I told her, like, I have this experience, but I mean, this is something going on in the market. So I would suggest you guys, I mean, start preparing for automation interview questions, and this video will help you. So start with our first question: what exception are faced in Selenium? So as this question I have already covered multiple times, like there are some runtime exception or compile time exception. But when I say Selenium, so we have WebDriver exception, we have um, alert not present exception, we have stale element exception, timeout exception, and other types of exceptions. So you can answer to that interviewer regarding those exceptions. But keep that in mind, that when you say stale element, the- I mean, you should be prepared for his next question, like what is tail element. If you're answering what is the exception type as timeout exception, so you should be aware of like what is this timeout exception, when it used to come, how to handle it. So these things you should know. What is page object model? As I have created a video, like what is page object model, even in 30 to 40 minutes I have created a page object model design pattern using page object model design pattern, a framework using that. So you can refer that. So right now everybody is aware of page object model, but I mean, not, do not stick to that, the definition of page object model. Explore some other part, like what is the need of page object model, what page object model is delivering that other framework model or framework pattern is not delivering. Next is, what is listeners? So I mean, there are multiple types of listeners, like I try, I test listeners. So I mean, you can use your listeners to listen your code. I mean, basically people used to use these listeners in reporting part. Like if you have a test.ng.xml file, and you can use listeners there. Your listener listen each and every step, and those steps will be recorded in your extent or LO report. Or you can use I retry listener, what it used to do, if your test case is failing and you thought like if I run it again it got pass or it is passing in a second time, but this is not sure, like sometime it got pass in first attempt, sometime in second. In this case we used to use retry. We thought like, okay, in automation if we retry one more time our test script will pass. So that's why I retry listener come into the picture. It used to contain some counter like one test case fail, run it one more time. This is how we can use it, and we used to pass the retry listener class in at the rate test. And the next question is difference between implicit weight and explicit weight. Very basic question, but when you are giving interview, do not think about some basic thing, because I mean if you just explaining the implicit weight and explicit weight definition and the syntax, the next question would be related to like what if I do not want to give implicit weight, is explicit weight work in that case, or vice versa. If I do not want explicit weight, I just use implicit weight, I keep on increasing, what will happen? In all those scenario, these scenario suggest like if you that you have working knowledge of automation, when to use implicit weight, when to use explicit weight, advantage and disadvantages of that, these all things. Next question is how to scroll down a page. So scrolling down a page, obviously there are two methods: scroll into the view using JavaScript, and you can also use the action classes method, scroll to the coordinate like x. You can pass your x by coordinate. Suppose this is a page and you need to scroll it to this point. If you have the coordinate like x and by axis coordinate, suppose I can say like 200 comma uh, 20. So if you provide 200 comma 20, your scroller will scroll to this point. So this is how things used to work. Next is how to perform right click. Again, this is also a action class method. Context click is used for right click. You can use the actions class. I mean, be specific about the class name, because sometimes we, I mean, we start writing action instead of actions. So keep that in mind that you should use actions name, because actions is a class, action is nothing. So this is how you can explain things. Start writing the code at your end and check that whether you are able to answer all those questions. This is how you can improve your interview ability. And I mean sometimes interview want a quick answer rather than explaining the detailing each and everything. Suppose if I'm talking about exception, so if I mean he just want the name of the exception rather than explain each and every exception. So if I know like 5 or 10, 5 or 6 exception, I can just name those exception. But let interviewer ask the detail of, do not start explaining each and every exception at your end or from your end. Let him ask. He asks you about what are the exception, you just name those exception. That's it. Let him ask what is this exception, what, when we used to I mean when this exception used to come. Let him ask. Next question is next company is Adobe. I mean everybody knows like Adobe is very good company, and they have their own pattern of taking interviews. They have their own pattern of taking interviews. And for a QA candidate or experienced QA candidate, Adobe, I mean Adobe type company used to ask like you should have a knowledge of DS, data structure. Without that they will never entertain you. If you are able to answer, suppose they are asking you to write a program to reverse this thing, but if you are using some brute force thing like using a for loop and just I mean writing all those, they are not happy. They want you, they want like the complexity of your problem. What is the complexity of that? If you haven't go through that, or you do not know about the complexity of the algorithm, then it will be difficult for you to crack Adobe, because Adobe is such company which requires some detailed, or I mean, data structures knowledge. I mean, why we are using list here? Why don't we use array only? Is there any other alternative data structure? What is the complexity of that? Why we are using for instead of while, or vice versa? Why we are using if instead of switch? So these all things you can expect from Adobe interview. If you are good in, I mean, analogical skills, or I mean, writing different types of code, then it is very good. Otherwise it would be very difficult. So explain framework, very basic, but do not expect a basic thing in Adobe. They drill down into the framework structure. They will ask you why you are using report. Then you can say like, okay, I'm using extent report. Why? And they can ask you which version or extent report you are using. Then they may again ask you, why are you not using Allure? So these all things you can expect in Adobe. Next is, what is how to handle multiple window in Selenium. As we used to use window, switch to window, where we used to get the window handles and switch between the window and switch among, I mean, nested windows, that we can do. What is desired capabilities? I mean, as you guys know, like we used to use desired capability. Right now, I mean, most of the things are, I mean, related to the options, Chrome options, Firefox options. So in options, we used to pass the OS version. We used to pass the window size which we want to open. We can, I mean, use user agent. We can use some SSL related thing. So if I want to configure my browser, like the browser should open in this window, the browser version should be that, and cookie should be clear. SSL, there should be there should not be any SSL. I want to open it in an incognito mode, so we can use options. Next is write XPath. So they may, I mean, ask you to write some XPath. They can ask you some cross question regarding XPath. So make sure you well prepare of all those XPath. I have created a very beautiful video how to, I mean, fetch or create the XPath. That is very detailed and very, I mean, you can refer that. How to upload a file in Selenium. Uploading a file is very important. When I say upload, it means to say, like, there are two things, like when the XPath attribute of that text box is type equal to file, then you can directly send the file name and it will automatically gets uploaded. But you need to check what is the XPath of that. I mean, this is the simplest way where we can use, by sending the path of the file in the text box, and that's it. Next is how to execute test cases parallelly. So as you guys know, I mean, if I want to execute my test cases parallelly, there are a couple of things you have to understand. First thing, if I want to execute my test cases parallelly, it means to say I should be having multiple drivers. How we can use multiple driver at a time? Then we have to use thread local parallelly initiate multiple driver for each test case. Suppose you are running three test cases, or you want to run three test cases parallelly, then the thread local initiate three driver, and each driver will be associated with the test one, test T1, T2, T3, and so on. So this is how. And there are some other things that you need to implement by doing or executing your test case parallelly. You need to put, I mean, your thread count, verbose, and these things in the testng.xml. And I mean, from testng.xml you can execute your test. Next is, what is assertion? So what all assertion we can assert by assert equal or assert true. And there are two types of assertion. Like, first one is soft assertion, and second one is hard assertion. Hard assertion means suppose I have written this script. If my task is failing at this point, my test will be finished at this point, and remaining piece of code will not be executed. But in software session, everything will gets executed. If any line is failing, that will be printed in our report. So that is the benefit of using soft assertion. Next is, what is the document object model, DOM. DOM is, as whenever we want to fetch the XPath, uh, we used to find the XPath by inspecting the page. So that when we inspect the page, the part of HTML is called DOM, where we used to find our HTML, and within the HTML, our elements and elements are there, and we can find. So this is all about the Adobe. In the next part, I will be covering the remaining these Capgemini, THBin, Appsaro interview. Thank you for watching. If you have any question, just comment on that. And these are very real interview question. So thank you.